My family called me poor at dinner. Then I revealed I owned the building we were in, shattering their illusions and reclaiming the legacy they mocked. You thought I was nothing? I whispered to myself, my voice steady with resolve as their world crumbled. The Thompson family's monthly dinners were less about food and more about financial peacocking. This evening in the sprawling estate outside Charleston promised to be especially unbearable. I took my usual seat near the fireplace, quietly observing while my cousins competed to see who could brag the loudest. Declan drawled, swirling his wine. Right next to the guy who owns half of Silicon Valley. Please, scoffed Isabel, flipping her designer clutch open with a flourish. We just closed on a vineyard in Bordeaux. Private access to the Med. You can't even put a price on that kind of view. I caught Isabel's eye, my lips twitching. Pricey view, Isabel. Hope it's worth the debt you leveraged against Thompson Towers. Her smile froze, and Declan's chuckle faltered. Always so snarky, Lila, she snapped, recovering. Jealous doesn't suit you. I hid my smile behind my glass of iced tea. If only they knew, Lila. Aunt Margaret's voice cut sharply across the table. You've been awfully quiet. Declan leaned in, his faux sympathy dripping. We were just wondering about your living situation. Still playing the pauper, Lila? He sneered. Or have you finally scraped enough to move out of that dump? And there it was. What about it? I replied, setting down my glass. This cramped duplex in Savannah, he said. Still renting down my glass, Isabel added, feigning surprise. Didn't know people our age still rented. I rented, I said, voice calm but pointed. Funny how you assume so much, Isabel. Ever check who owns that block? Her eyes narrowed, but she laughed it off. Oh, Lila, always dreaming big. I nearly laughed. The Bay Street complex was my company's first commercial acquisition under Oak Ridge Ventures. To them, I was a struggling tenant. In reality, I was the owner. I like the space, I said evenly. You're 36, sweetie, Margaret added with a patronizing smile. It's time to grow up. Buy something real. Real? I echoed, my tone sharp enough to make her flinch. Like your charity galas funded by siphoning maintenance budgets, Margaret? The table went quiet, her pearls trembling as she clutched them. Real. Try a $2 billion 0-cents portfolio of multifamily buildings, commercial towers, and yes, Thompson Towers, the very property they gathered in monthly 3 months ago. I acquired it discreetly through a private equity arm they'd never trace back to me. I've managed just fine, I replied. Declan smirked. You can't even afford a mortgage. Mortgage? I shot back, leaning forward. Declan, I could buy your ranch and your ego with cash and still have change, replaced by a scowl. I leaned back and let them talk, because soon the lease renewal would come across their desks and guess whose name would be on the letterhead? Dad finally glanced up from his wine glass. Now, Declan. Not everyone's blessed with your sharp instincts. Lila chose her path. Aunt Margaret chimed in with a sigh, as though I'd disappointed them by not marrying a hedge fund manager or becoming a lifestyle influencer. Her path? Margaret scoffed. Lila, you're a glorified leasing agent. When will you stop embarrassing the Vance name? I smiled thinly. Embarrassing? Wait until you see what I've built, Margaret. You'll choke on those pearls. They thought I spend my days showing cheap walk-ups to broke grad students barely scraping by on commission checks. What they didn't know was that Lila Vance, the family underachiever, was also Oak Ridge Ventures' family Adolf, the highest firm quietly snapping up commercial and residential properties throughout the Southeast for the last decade. Speaking of real estate, Isabel interjected with a sparkle in her eye. Have you heard about that situation on Bay Street? Some firm bought the entire block. They're going to knock it all down, she added with mock pity. Guess that little apartment of yours will finally go. I tilted my head, voice silky. Knock it down? Isabel, you really should check your sources. That firm's preserving every brick. Care to guess why? Her confidence wavered, but she brushed it off. You wouldn't know, Lila. You're not in those circles. I kept my expression neutral. I was the buyer, and I had no intention of tearing anything down. The Bay Street complex was a hidden gem. Brick façades, vintage detailing, and rent protections for families who'd lived there for decades. I was deep in a historically respectful renovation. Really? I asked. Hadn't heard. Well, of course not, Declan smirked. Deals that size are way out of your league. If you get booted, Margaret said brightly, you can always move back into the guest house. We'll help you find something more respectable. Maybe even someone respectable. Respectable? I laughed, cold and cutting. Like your husband's shell company funneling profits from Thompson Towers? Margaret, respectable's a stretch. Her face flushed, and Dad shot me a warning look, but I held my ground. I'm happy, I said flatly. And so is my landlord. Isabel gave a tight laugh. You can't live a small life forever, dear. Vance used to mean something in this state. It still does, I said, voice low and dangerous. Just not your version of it, Isabel. My Vance name's on contracts you'll never touch. It still did, just not the way they thought. In real estate circles, Oak Ridge was synonymous with ethical growth, and tenants nurse investing, the antithesis of my cousin's flashy developments that bulldozed communities for clout. Actually, Dad said, setting down his glass, this meeting's partly about business. The board's worried about the new owner of Thompson Towers. I tilted my head. Oak Ridge Ventures bought a majority stake 3 months ago, he said. No one knows who they are. Possibly a foreign investor. Declan nodded. Has to be. These tycoons love legacy properties. Foreign? I said, raising an eyebrow. Or maybe someone closer to home, Declan. Someone who's been watching your every move. He blinked, caught off guard, but recovered with a dismissive wave. You're delusional, Lila. If only they knew that their feared mystery investor was sitting right here in a thrifted cardigan and stuffed boots. And now, Dad continued, they're asking tough questions, especially about our accounting practices. Creative accounting, like the way Declan borrowed from the building fund to finance his Aspen retreat, or how Isabel labeled her luxury handbags as client engagement expenses. I am sure it's nothing serious, Aunt Margaret said, her pearls twitching with unease. The Vance name still means something, that's just it. Dad cut in. This Oak Ridge person doesn't seem impressed by names. They've ordered a full audit. I watched the shift ripple across their faces, panic tightly veiled behind designer smiles. An audit would uncover more than just questionable expenses. It would crack their whole game wide open. Maybe Lila could help, Isabel said suddenly, her tone sugary. She works in real estate, doesn't she? Maybe she knows someone at the management company. Help? I said, voice dripping with sarcasm. Isabel, I could run circles around your board. But sure, let's pretend I'm just a nobody with connections. They all turned to me at once. Just like that, I was no longer an embarrassment. I was potentially useful. I mostly work with smaller residential clients, I said smoothly. Nothing on the scale of Thompson Towers. For God's sake, Declan snapped. You can't even help your own family. Help? I shot back, standing now. Declan, I'm about to help you face reality. You just won't like how it feels. Mom gave him a warning glance, but her silence said enough. Even Dad was back to scrolling, uninterested in defending me. They had no idea how helpful I was about to be, just not in the way they hoped. Tomorrow evening, Oak Ridge Ventures would release a public statement. Effective immediately, Thompson Towers would undergo major operational reform. No more shadow budgets, no more nepotistic contracts, no more charging the building like it was a family credit card. I glanced around the penthouse. Artwork bought with maintenance funds. Couches triple their listed price. Fixtures installed by Isabel's husband's firm with bloated invoices. Anyway, I said, rising and brushing off my jeans. Some of us have early mornings, Isabel smirked. Off to show more rent-controlled studios. Keep laughing, Isabel, I said, pausing at the door. Tomorrow you'll be begging me for a lease. I slung my worn leather bag over my shoulder. Inside the board briefing, legal filings and renovation proposals worth more than anything in this room. No, Lila Aunt Margaret called sweetly. Next time, maybe dress more like a Vance. Appearances matter. I smiled. Don't worry, I said. This evening, I look exactly like the Vances expect, but you won't like what I'm wearing when I take your empire apart. They just didn't realize I was already the one running the show. If you've been quietly rooting for Lila all along, don't miss what happens when the boardroom doors open. Subscribe to the channel so you're the first to see how the family reacts when they realize the nobody they dismissed now holds the keys to everything. The next evening, I stood in my real office, an entire penthouse floor overlooking downtown Savannah, and prepared for the moment I'd planned for over a year. My assistant, Tara, walked in briskly, setting a cappuccino beside my laptop. "The Thompson Towers board is already seated," she said. "Your family got here early, trying to charm the independent members." "Charming," I smirked. "They're sweating, Tara. I can feel it from here." I smirked, imagining Declan and Isabel working the room in desperation. Audit packets all printed and distributed. The forensic team uncovered even more than expected. She paused. "Are you sure you want to go through with this? Once they know, there's no turning back." "They need to learn," I said quietly. "That legacy isn't a license to abuse power." I turned to the glass, catching my reflection. Gone were the jeans and cardigan. Today, I wore a deep navy Ralph Lauren suit. Sharp lines, soft strength. The kind of look Aunt Margaret used to dream I'd wear to meet a husband. Instead, I'd wait to dismantle their house of cards. "The ownership announcement goes live in 30 minutes, Tara added. "Once it hits, you'll be unmasked." "Then let's begin," I said, picking up my briefcase. The Thompson Towers boardroom hushed as I entered. My family was clustered at the far end, unnerved, undressed, and visibly rattled. "Who are you?" Declan barked. "This is a private meeting." I set my briefcase down, meeting his glare. "Private? Declan, nothing's private when you've been looting this building for years." I calmly placed my briefcase at the head of the table. "I'm Lila Vance," I said, "founder and sole owner of Oak Ridge Ventures, the company that owns this building, and several others your family leveraged illegally." Margaret turned ghost white. Isabel's parted, but no sound came. My father's hands tightened on his pen. "Lila," he breathed. "Surprised Dad," I said, voice steady. "You should have paid attention when I stopped asking for your approval." I nodded. "Good evening." I opened the briefcase and began sliding audit reports across the table. "Shall we review your financials? This is insane," Glenn stammered. You're just what?" I asked. "The black sheep? The renter? The woman in consignment clothes?" Isabel blinked. "But you show apartments." "Show apartments?" I laughed, sharp and unapologetic. "Isabel, I own half of Savannah. You're standing in my building. I work," I said simply, "and I built something real with integrity. Not illusion." The board watched, stunned, as the proud Vance family began to unravel one page at a time. "These folders," I said, "contain detailed documentation of every misused fund, inflated invoice, and falsified receipt, reports of financial irregularities involving Thompson Towers accounts." I began distributing the final set of documents. "Declan, would you care to explain the $3 million, 0 cents in roof repairs that financed your Aspen property?" He flushed so hard and fast I thought he might pass out. "Or, Isabel," I continued, flipping the next page, "maybe you'd like to walk us through your husband's invoices, charging 3 times the market rate for basic plumbing." "You're lying," Isabel hissed, slamming her hand on the table. "You've always been jealous of me." I tilted my head, unfazed. "Jealous, Isabel? I'm holding your dirty laundry. Want me to air it out louder?" "You air out your own family's laundry like this," Aunt Margaret "No," I said evenly. "You aired it out. I'm just making sure it gets cleaned." Dad finally spoke, voice low and pleading. "Lila, sweetheart, we can explain." "Explain?" I cut him off, voice like steel. "Explain how you let this family bleed our legacy dry while you laughed at me for failing." "Don't," I said, raising a hand. "I've watched this family treat our great-grandfather's legacy like a personal ATM. While you mocked my so-called humble life, I was building something better, on values, not vanity." "But why?" Isabel asked, dazed. "Why pretend to be struggling?" "I didn't pretend anything," I replied. "I lived modestly. I invested wisely." "You assumed wealth had to be loud." "The Bay Street building," Declan said, stunned. "You really live there?" "I own it," I corrected. "And most of the block. And no, I'm not demolishing it because some of us care about people, not just return." Suddenly, phones around the table buzzed. One board member looked up, reading from his screen. "Oak Ridge Ventures reveals CEO's identity." Lila Vance, a strange member of the Vance family confirmed as owner of $3 billion, 0 cents real estate portfolio, fumbled her phone. Ranked among top ethical developers, she muttered. Historic preservation. Tenant protections. This will ruin us, Isabel whispered, pale. No, I said firmly. This will save you from yourselves. Effective today, Thompson Towers will operate transparently. No more cell games, no more sweetheart contracts, and if we don't comply— Declan tried to sound bold, but his voice trembled. Comply, I said, voice cold. Declan, you're lucky I'm not pressing charges. Yet? He smiled. Then I'll pass these reports to the authorities. I'm sure the IRS would find them enlightening. Maya thickened. What do you want? Dad finally asked. I met their eyes one by one. Greatfather built communities, not just profit margins. I stood, gathering my papers. You have a choice. Work with me to restore that legacy, I said evenly. Or find somewhere else to live. I hear there's some lovely rentals in Hilton Head. I turned to leave. Lila, wait. Dad stopped me just as I reached the door. I was wrong about you. Wrong. I turned, eyes blazing. You didn't just underestimate me, Dad. You erased me. But I'm still here, and I'm not going anywhere. Yes, I replied quietly. You were? The aftermath unfolded like something out of a business drama. The media couldn't get enough of the hidden heiress of Savannah, who'd quietly built a real estate empire and dismantled her family's illusions in one board meeting. Aunt Margaret resigned from 3 local boards, too ashamed to show her face. Isabel's husband cert-folded within weeks of the audit release, but not all of it was bitter. Finally facing actual consequences, enrolled in a public university's real estate program. Isabel began volunteering at a transitional housing shelter downtown. She told me later it gave her more purpose than her gallery openings ever had. And Dad? He asked to learn the business, not as a father reclaiming control, but as a student. This time he wanted to understand what I'd built. 3 months later, I was sitting in my Bay Street apartment. Yes, I kept it, reviewing new quarterly reports. Thompson Towers was thriving, leases were stable, tenant satisfaction was up, and small retailers on the ground floor were turning healthy profits. A knock broke my focus. I opened the door to find my mother. She wore jeans and no makeup. It took me a moment to process the casualness. I got your invitation, she said, holding it up. A courtyard holiday party. You're actually coming? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Or is this another lecture about my small life? She flinched, but held my gaze. I'm here to listen, Lila. For once. I nodded. It's not quite your scene, no, admitted, glancing around my modest scenes. But I'm learning that maybe scene isn't everything. She picked up a photo, me at 24, beaming at my real estate license ceremony. I never asked, she said. Why this path? Because I wanted to build something real, I replied. Not just buy it and flaunt it. And now, she murmured, you control more than all of us. I do, I nodded. But control isn't the goal, purpose is. She looked at me seriously. Will you teach me? Come, tonight, I said. Meet the families who've lived here for decades. Listen, that's where legacy begins. Later, I stood by my window, watching lights twinkle across Savannah. This city I'd quietly made mine. Thompson Towers glowed in the distance, no longer a monument to greed, but a symbol of restoration. Below me, the Bay Street building buzzed with quiet life. Brickwork, original wood beams, and garden courtyards were preserved with care. My phone pinged with new messages, partnership offers, speaking invitations, acquisition deals. Oak Ridge Ventures was in high demand now. But I kept my schedule humane, my routine grounded. Success to me wasn't about outshining my past. Oh, it was about building something that mattered, something that would last. Sometimes the person they pity becomes the one they must learn from. And sometimes the best kind of triumph doesn't roar, it endures. A week later, at the Bay Street holiday party, I stood by the garden fountain, watching my family acclimate to a world they once dismissed. Mom sat beside Mrs. Carter, a tenant here for 40 years, listening with genuine interest. Declan helped string lights with Mr. Monroe, a World War II veteran and longest-term resident. Isabel laughed beside a table of kids icing sugar cookies. She caught my eye, hesitating before approaching. I was wrong, Lila, she said softly. I thought you were nothing. But you're everything we're not. Learn from it, Isabel. That's all I ask. Slowly, they were learning. Real wealth isn't in what you can flaunt. It's in what you preserve, what you share, what you elevate. Dad joined me near the cocoa table. You know, he said, your great-grandfather believed buildings should shelter hearts, not just wallets. I nodded. I found his old ledgers, handwritten notes about protecting tenants. We forgot that. He looked at me, not like a daughter who'd gone off track, but like someone who'd carried the torch he'd dropped. You could have ruined us. Never the point, I said, watching a little girl twirl under the fairy lights. I wanted to build something that would outlast me. And sometimes the greatest success isn't in proving them wrong. It's in offering them a better version of right. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or quietly counted out, then maybe you see a little of yourself in me. I didn't set out to prove anyone wrong. I just wanted to build something real, something that couldn't be taken away because it was rooted in values, not vanity. If my story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in my shoes? What have you built in silence while others doubted you? Let's talk about it. Let's give each other credit for the quiet work, the long nights, the tough choices. And if you're facing a moment like I once did when the world expects nothing from you, don't shout louder. Just build stronger. You don't need approval to begin. You need purpose and consistency. The rest will come. Support this journey by subscribing to the channel. There are more stories ahead about resilience, redemption, and redefining success on your own terms. Because legacy isn't what you inherit, it's what you create. And sometimes the best revenge is not revenge at all. It's becoming exactly who they said you couldn't be. So, subscribe, stay with me, and let's build something that lasts.